I almost said this is the CHRILLCAST. Whoops. This is Printed and Pressed. I'm Chris.
And I'm Andrew.
And I can't decide if I like this view or this view better.
Let's go back. Let's go back.
This one?
Yeah, it feels
Scoot
way
back a
too
little.
close the other way. Also, we're without Will today.
Pour one out for Will. No, I'm just kidding. It's not a rest in peace type of deal. So, for those of you that don't remember, I have covered this many times. I am Catholic, so I have a little bit of biases going into this book. Andrew is not.
So I also have biases, Chris. It's okay to say that.
And I'm not going to speak for Will. I'll let him speak for himself if he hops in the chat at some point. But I picked a book that is written by a Catholic author named Kennedy Hall. And so some of the opinions expressed in this book are very Catholic. Yeah. And we're going to get into it as we go. But the title of the book, if you buy it on Amazon, is called Lockdown with the Devil. But if you want to get the Kindle version, it does exist. It does not have the same title. I'll pull it up right now and show you what I'm talking about. If you want to get the Kindle version of this book, it is called Family Be Damned.
And don't let that location thing at the bottom confuse you. This book,
it's not 17,000 pages or 1,700 pages. It's not that.
It's only 136 or something like that.
Yeah. So this is kind of a more obscure book, but I thought it'd be fun to cover it because I really liked it. It's kind of like, I guess if I was going to describe it without going into details yet, I would call it like a modern screw tape letters written during the lockdowns and the pandemic.
Yeah, I guess.
I did say modern.
I don't like to compare it to screw tape letters too closely, just because.
Well, the thing is, stylistically,
intent. The intent is there. Yeah.
It is styled to be written like screw tape letters because it is literally letters between little devils.
Yeah.
About trying to corrupt the family.
Right.
So, all right. So we'll just roll right into a little synopsis of it, and then we'll argue over the better parts of it.
It's a very fast synopsis. Let's be honest.
Well, I mean, it starts out with the family is kind of a normal family. I mean, when you think about a modern family, it's pretty normal. It's two adults who are relatively spiritual Christians, but not really don't really understand what that means, it seems like.
I mean, let's be honest. Okay, it's two professional working adults. They have careers. They got 2 kids. So family of 4. They are what you would probably say are just going through the motion Christians.
Yes, there you go.
Lukewarms, you would say, where they go and do all the practices per se, even though it doesn't seem like they're really that practicing in this book.
I don't think they're practicing at the time the book starts. They probably did growing up, but they went through the motions, like you said.
They went through the motions as kids, and then they didn't do any of the motions. They just kind of were culturally Christian at this point.
Yeah, culturally Christian.
I would you can even say that. Definitely lukewarms.
I do like the names he chose for the devils. Malthus is such a, and I like how it was Malthus, my boy. It reminds me of the meme from like the Zelda CDI games, like my boy. Yeah. But I do like that. But he starts out with like the 2 devils talking, and this is like the intro to a rookie devil trying to corrupt the family, right?
Yeah, I mean the whole point is also that
kind of describe the family situation.
Well, before that, he describes the devil situation. So, like, this is a very new devil coming in to try to tempt and manage this family. It's a thing where the chief devil, I guess, the mentor devil, is realizing that they don't teach them as well as they used to. Because the world is so easy to corrupt people. It's not much of a challenge anymore, given how, I guess, non-believing the general culture has become. So that's another important contextual setting here.
And I feel like that description of culture, especially in regards to where Christianity is at the moment, I feel like there wasn't a whole lot that you would disagree with in his initial assessment there.
No. It's, I mean, when you think about it, it's like definitely the push to keep, religion out of everything has made it where it's not in most of the cultural influences, stories and stuff. It's kind of removed from that. So unless you're actively pursuing it, you're not even necessarily being exposed to the moral storylines that you might try to choose to emulate if you were just going through life with those. Well, okay, for example, we've read the Chronicles of Narnia, we've read Lord of the Rings, even though we haven't discussed it yet. Those are books that if they were more popular at any time with more people, you would get certain heroes' journeys and stuff that would be more second nature to people when they go through hard times, that are a bit more aligned with Christianity than some of the more morally gray characters you're getting today.
Sure, that makes sense. And then, so after that, slowly the book leads into the lockdowns of the pandemic, which leads to a lot of situations where the family is at home together and they start to recognize some of the issues within their family unit. And this is probably where some of the themes of the book are changing. Like, where maybe you might not agree with some of the themes here.
Well, I think it's also complicated because there's parts here where the issues with the family dynamic, I think it was stressed more so by him losing his job than by the family dynamic specifically.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, until he loses his job, it's not like it's a huge spiral for this family. They would have just been coasting in comfort.
Sure.
Even in lockdown, I feel like.
I'm actually trying to reboot our Rumble stream. It didn't work for some reason. Oh, but it is now. All right. So if anybody tuned on Rumble, you're only missing the opening part. I'm going to re-upload this after we're done. Just apologize for that. Okay. All right.
But you get what I'm saying, Chris, right?
I do. I understand what you're saying.
In the beginning, they seem relatively together still. So
together, but even like, I guess it'd be even
strained, distant, maybe.
Let me stop you there. I think it would almost be willing. I'd almost be willing to call it a lukewarm family because their interactions are limited on purpose. It seems like, because everybody's so individually oriented.
Well, there's not a lot of affection between the husband and wife. And the activity,
they kind of let the marriage go on the back burner to other things.
Yeah, and the activity with the kids seems a bit not like, it doesn't seem like family dinner is a huge thing or something. That, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I did like one of his commentaries in the beginning where he talks about how families have become so passive they allow kind of the government to tell them what's appropriate for their kids. When you're talking about like the MPAA rating scale, it's like you gradually graduate a child from G, PG, PG-13, R. It's almost like you're saying this is not okay for you now, but when you're an adult, it's okay to watch all these things, no matter how much debauchery might be in it.
Right. I mean, I do like his take on nuanced, in a nuanced way. I like it. I actually forgot about it until you put this page up, but the fact that the husband sterilized himself the hot just the nuance of that as like a leading to a sterile family in general as like a concept. I think that's a big issue with culture today, is that a lot of relationships are not actually long-term in concept or design or even just practice, because so many people aren't even really trying to have kids, which there's nothing wrong with only having 2 kids. I'm going to be completely honest, but when I take it to the extreme and I think of how many people talk about not having kids at all. So
people are individually focused to an extent that was never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, there's an infantile viewpoint of a lot of young adults who could be in their 30s and say they're not sure if they even want kids or not. And it's just like, it's kind of wild that you're already 30 and you're not sure if you want that or not.
That is,
right?
Let's put it this way, it's never been seen in the history of humanity that people are like, I don't know if I want kids and they're 30.
Yeah. Like, that's a wildly old age to say you're not sure if you want kids. And that's a crazy percentage of
when you hit 30 in like the medieval ages, you're an old maid and nobody wants to marry you.
Exactly.
I mean, men had it a little better back then because they could still get married in their 30s and still have children. But
as we discussed in previous books, 28, the 29 age range was actually normal for men to get married at that time frame.
Because they had established themselves, they had jobs, they had money.
They had to establish their situation with what type of wealth or status they could before they were able to get married. So the age of men hasn't necessarily changed, but the age of women has changed a lot more.
Yes. Yep. And it is like the whole men be like volunteering to be like sterilized. That's what they call it in this book.
Yeah.
Or have a vasectomy. That's what the medical term for this is. That was never something any man would have considered before the modern age.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's still kind of a wild thing to consider, just from a standpoint of like, you want to remove the option.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Completely remove it, because you see so many people who think really short term these days.
They do.
And it's one of those things where you're very high time preference to just think like with the feelings of now, instead of, well, I might feel that way now, but what if I change my mind in 2 years?
Well, to be fair, though, the vasectomies are like mostly reversible from what I understand.
Mostly, but it's still a painful freaking procedure.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not like it's a chill, like, oh, we're going to turn this valve open.
There was discussion. I don't know if it was like a Bill Gates group or something of like actually installing a valve in the testicles. And I was like, what?
At least, you know what? Conceptually, that's a better idea than how the vasectomy is done now. But
I'd be worried about remote monitoring or remote controls or something like that.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, the concept, too many people, I think, are so short-term sighted that rushing into a decision like that is, I don't think many people actually think long-term enough.
I mean, it's less permanent than, like, say, what is it, hysterectomy, where they would just remove all the female.
Oh, yeah.
So, no, like, if you're going to choose one or the other.
But it's one of those things where I think the experience is one that most guys are not wanting to re-experience. So it's reversible, but it's not like it's a low barrier to entry reversibility.
Right. Yeah, it's a pretty involved procedure to get them back.
It's a pretty steep incentive not to reverse it.
Plus, like so I guess the other thing is, like, if you're gonna if you do that and like your wife is like, that needs to be okay. I don't agree with it in the first place. I'll just flat out say it. I don't agree with getting a vasectomy personally, but if you're gonna do that, the couple needs to be aligned on that. It doesn't seem like in this book the couple was as aligned.
No, it sounded okay. I interpret it as in that was a conversation they had about not wanting more kids, and he kind of rushes to do it. Whereas she eventually thought how she wouldn't have minded having a third kid.
Yeah, and to be fair, from my own
life experience, a common occurrence. Most people.
I have really never met anybody in older age after their kids are grown who has said, man, I wish I had less kids. I've never heard somebody say that.
No, I've always heard people say they wish they had another.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially ones with smaller households. But like that's one of those things where people think short term still.
They really do, because like the amount of time that you're raising children is like anywhere between a fourth and a fifth of your life, depending on how long you live. Yeah. And once that time frame's over, it's over.
Right. I mean, plus, never hurts to have more kids. One of them is bound to not
take care of you in your old age.
The more you have, the more likely you are to not be disappointed by at least one of them.
To not be alone on your deathbed. Anyway, that was an interesting chapter. I guess we can just go through chapter by chapter and have discussions as we go, since this seems to be working. They discuss this debt issues, because a lot of families live paycheck to paycheck beyond their means because of the consumerism of the Western world.
But it's not really consumerism.
It isn't. It's keeping up with the Joneses.
But it is and it isn't. It's really because of how our money is.
Well, fiat money doesn't help.
It's because it's fiat money. And
you want to know about fiat money? Go watch our Thank God for Bitcoin.
Well, I'm just saying, we as a society have adopted a form of money that makes it where you don't think long term.
It encourages short term spending.
Yes, because you might not think it like consciously think about it every day, but you've always seen the value of your money float away from you because it's constantly being printed more and more. And that makes you live in the moment and feel the need to buy things now, and not necessarily be a saver. So the consumerism concept is more so baked into the money issue than us as a culture per se.
I think the problem, though, that you run into, and this is what they run into in this book, is you spread yourself too thin, and any one thing can take down your entire house of cards.
Yeah, because you're not planning for tomorrow.
You're only planning for today.
Exactly.
And this does happen. This comes back to haunt them.
It happens to a lot of people.
I do think it's interesting. Maybe we'll get to this in a minute when he talks about the father's job. That's an interesting aspect of this too. Although clearly the mom is something in the medical field.
I think she was just a nurse.
Probably a nurse. I can't remember for sure, but it was something to do with that. It was definitely medical field related. They talk about the teacher who's a good influence on the kids. So basically preaching Christian ideals, mostly Catholic ideals, to the kid who the parents aren't all that Orthodox Christian, period. Yeah. And so when the kid brings this home, of course, there's some shock value to the parents, and the devil say, hey, we're going to use this against the family to pin the kids' faith against the parents because they think it's weird and outside the box of their thinking. So that's kind of what this part's about. Talks about how the parents are dim-witted with political correctness, and we'll conclude that with their lukewarm upbringing in the faith, they're going to conclude that the church has changed their teachings despite not changing.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where people are so concerned about not offending anybody that they no longer stand on their own principles. Like, you can stand by your beliefs and principles without being a dick. It's very doable.
Well, yeah, I mean, because like there's a difference between like I believe this and what you're doing is entirely against this. Yeah, and I mean, just being like, you suck, you heretic.
You're allowed to abstain.
There's a big difference between those two things.
You're allowed to, you can be in the world, but not of the world. So like you're there, but you're abstaining from certain things. Like you don't have to go along with it just because someone demands it of you.
Right. All right. And then into chapter 3, he's got I think this is where they're trying to convince the dad to like move into like pornography, which is one of the ultimate downfalls in this thing. But in this chapter specifically, they're talking about the MPAA ratings I was talking about earlier, where
there's a more important one in here.
What's the more important part of this one? The reality TV?
Reality TV.
It's popular form of idol worship and gossip.
Well, no, I was more so going to say that I don't necessarily agree with 100% of his. I don't necessarily agree 100% with his take on it. I'm just saying that psychologically speaking, that there is a lot of evidence that watching too much reality TV gives you like the same anxieties and expectations for drama in your own life.
Oh yeah, watching drama constantly.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily agree that he does the best form of discussing it, but
you agree that it's bad for the family that somebody's watching reality TV all the time.
Yeah, because that also does the whole keeping up with the Joneses concept, distorts reality usually in regards to like how many trips where people should be going, what type of money you might have to even afford those things. And then just the drama of the relationship, it does bleed into your personal life, in my opinion.
Oh, it absolutely does. I would agree with that. And like I said earlier, I think the whole graduated rating system where kids, I guess it's like every time I pass a certain age, regardless of my maturity and my parents' thought process, I can graduate to the next level of watching. Whereas I think most parents just allow that rating system to babysit their children on what they're watching. Whereas parents really should take more of an approach of an active viewing. Like, okay, if I'm going to let my kids watch this, I should watch it first and then make a decision based on my own morals and faith, whether they should watch it. Now, every parent's going to view this differently. Every kid's going to view it differently. And we have to make decisions based on that approach.
See, this is one of those things where I don't believe in guidance less viewing, as he describes, but I do believe, and I don't believe in like saying they shouldn't just watch this thing because I don't necessarily approve of whatever it is. I'm kind of the mindset that you shouldn't shelter completely. You should let them see it, but in a way where you do provide guidance to help understand what they've
at
seen.
An age appropriate level, though.
Yes.
Like you're not gonna show, let's put it this way. I'm not gonna watch Game of Thrones again, but I would never allow a child under the age of 18 to watch that without
I completely agree. I'm just saying, well, then again, I don't think all kids are the same maturity wise.
Well, that's why every parent has to take an approach to their child that's individualized.
Yeah. No, I'm making a point that
like one kid might be ready to watch Lord of the Rings at 12 and another kid might be ready at, I don't know, 14. Who knows?
You could watch it at 8. I don't know your time.
I disagree with you on that.
Dude,
I'm just saying, like, you like maybe a bad example, but every child needs an individualized approach based on where they're at and how you view them. As a parent, you have to take an individualized approach to the children.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get the impression though that he's necessarily taking that view in this. So that's us discussing.
Now, here's what I would say though. There are some films that I just flat out won't watch, and I wouldn't recommend them for my kids to watch. And I think that's what he's pointing out is like letting the R rating approve or disapprove a movie is lazy parenting, and they shouldn't be doing that.
I mean, so I'll say this though. I'll be completely honest. I do think in a lot of things, I do think that, especially with the R rating system, I think a lot of Christians have been way too sheltering of kids prior to them going off to college. And I think that has been to the detriment of many. When they go from 0 to 100,
if you don't give a good defense for your children, they will run off to college and become the opposite of what you want them to be.
Yes.
Because they'll be experiencing everything for the first time and they'll be highly influenced by the new ideas they didn't have as a child.
And that's where I think movies and art, just media in general, can be a useful tool to discuss those topics. Even though it might make you uncomfortable, I think it's important to use that as a tool still because of that. Just because they're going to go out there and experience the world, and it's better for them to have had some exposure to it than to have had none, especially when you're not there to provide the sounding board.
I could see the guided exposure that it seems like you're describing as potentially beneficial. Yeah. But like I'm saying, you need to prepare your kids in a defensive manner so that they retain the ideals going in. Like, here's the thing. If you're not indoctrinating your own children, somebody else is.
Yeah. I mean,
you want them to be indoctrinated in the correct belief system that you value in order that they are protected as adults.
Let me use an example here. All right. You don't want your kid to go do heroin, right?
Right.
So what's the best way to prevent your kid from doing heroin? Is it to act like heroin does not exist and hide it from your kid forever and ever and ever? Or should you show them what heroin does to people?
Or even just general addiction.
Or general addiction. Like, is it better to showcase that to them in like informative, like a documentary or something? Like, it's way better to expose them to these are the harsh realities of the risks. Otherwise, the first
at an appropriate age.
Yes. Yes, that's an assumption here.
Okay.
Otherwise, the first time someone offers them heroin, they're not going to know what the hell it is.
And hopefully they like. I would hope that just based on the fact that they're like, hey, do this needle, your kid would be like at least a little apprehensive. Like maybe not.
I don't know, man. Enough people do that shit that it's you think,
All right.
but
I think we've made our point on this one. Let's move on to the next one. We're on chapter or the fourth letter now. Yep. All right, let's see here. Okay. Oh, this is when he kind of talks about mob mentality and going against that teacher.
They're trying to go after the teacher, basically.
Yeah.
That's it.
And this is like getting the parents to gang up on that teacher, because the best way for them to cancel out the kids' faith and their favor towards the family going down the dark path they need to go down for the devils to win, basically they have to turn either the teacher against the family or the kid against the teacher. The
key thing to glean from this discussion portion would be that when someone is doing I guess, morally correct, a good example, upstanding citizen type thing, people who don't want to be exposed or shown that they are being bad are going to try to tear that person down.
Right.
Because no one wants their own hypocrisy exposed ever. So there's one of those things where it's like, to make yourself feel better, you tear down the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what this is, where it's like, this person is spiritually good right now, so the demonic influence wants to tear them down, because you want to sully the person that's an example of what you could be if you weren't sullied.
Yeah, you want to point out the mistakes of others so that your mistakes don't look so bad.
Yeah.
You want to point out where somebody else failed. I mean, this is the exact opposite of what a Christian should do.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's completely contrary to like forgive and forget type of stuff too.
Yeah.
Because you'll look for anything to say someone's a hypocrite.
If all you do is look for the hypocrisy of others, then you yourself are a hypocrite. If that's all you're doing is tearing other people down flat out, like not trying to improve them or make them better, but just like, hey, you suck too. Like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you're trying to say, if you're using it as an excuse not to listen to somebody's advice or perspective, then yes, you're right. But you should look for hypocrisy still. That is a thing.
I'm not saying you should not look for hypocrisy. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if all you're doing is looking for hypocrisy,
you should be seeking it out, I think. Personally.
I think it shows your ego, though, if all you do is look for the hypocrisy of others. Because you're like, I'm perfect. Everybody else is a hypocrite. Like that's the kind of mentality I see here. Like that's what they want. They want.
I think you can separate self-awareness from seeking out hypocrisy.
Yes, but that requires you to recognize that you yourself are also not perfect.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Okay, so the next part, the conversation between the boy and his parents. So clearly, the devil's influence made the boy have some conversations about the faith and the Orthodox church teacher or whatever, and they're fighting now.
Yeah, I think we can kind of summarize the next couple chapters for the most part, but like they're very similar. There's not a lot that happens in these.
It's really about slowly degrading the teacher and the kids' relationship, and slowly putting the family, at least the parents, against the faith as if it's new and not good.
Yeah, I mean,
and also the increase of fear due to the ongoing pandemic.
The son is constantly slightly going closer to the religion. He does take a step back at one point and then doubles back down.
Yeah, and then it seems like when you get to chapter 7, which is we're still ongoing with this constant tug of war between the faith and the kids. The daughter. There's a younger sister. There's a boy and a girl. Boy's older, daughter's younger. There's a decent chunk of years between them, so the daughter's significantly younger. She relies on him to get to any kind of faith-related thing that they would go to.
Well, she's also young enough that she's kind of too innocent for anything bad.
Right, exactly. So like she's not there. There's nothing. she's still reading mostly, not even watching TV. So she's not even influenced by commercials or anything else.
Yeah.
But basically,
that's the gist of the though, is that it's like
she's looking up to her brother with his faith, and she likes that. So she's kind of following in his footsteps with the faith.
Yeah.
And they've been praying. It sounds like, is this the point where they've been praying together yet, or has that not been talked about? Okay, so they've been praying together.
Either this one or the next one, but I don't think it.
Let me see.
It's not that important which one.
Yeah, I guess it's not that important which chapter it happens in.
The whole point, though, is they're trying to set it up where the father is such a disappointment, though, that it will condemn her as well.
Or more just that when he doesn't hide his shame anymore at some point in the book.
They're trying to break the relationship between father-daughter.
And father and son.
Well, mostly father-daughter, to give her the daddy issue thing going forward. That's part of the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, that will inevitably, honestly, when you destroy the relationship between the kids and either parent, but the father especially, it kind of breaks the family apart.
Yeah. That's the gist of this specific chapter.
Yeah, and I did. So here's something, though, since we are currently reading to get through the Truth and Beauty.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting commentary here that kind of agrees with Andrew Klavan's perspective, is where he's talking about how the daughter is reading stories about defeating dragons, serving kings, etc., like that, like your old chivalrous tales.
Exactly what I mentioned at the start of this.
Yeah, I was, like I said, this is really interesting that they both kind of have a similar opinion, where when you start going into the old society and the old societal norms of the books, it keeps people more likely to follow in faith, and especially Christian.
It's because the morals are
inherently in the story.
Yeah, and then it's one of those things where what is right, and what is wrong. You don't have as many morally gray characters in some of those.
I mean, you still have some, but not that many.
Not the hero that you recognize
which one. Yeah, you recognize.
And the morally gray portions are things that are demons that actually cause them agony when they have to reconcile their actions. It's not necessarily well, I killed somebody and that's okay. It has to be justified still, Chris.
I think chapter 8 is where you might get some interesting commentary from Andrew.
Which one is this? I've already skipped out on commentary for some of them that I was going to go back to later.
Well, this is the one where he has the historical retelling office, where he talks about in most democracies, citizens are actually seen as the enemy of the government.
Oh,
and that's kind of a growing. What's the right word for this? I guess when you're politicians, and this goes to right along with your, what's that number you always talk about?
Dunbar's number.
I feel like this is an automatic discussion on Dunbar's number, because
a little bit
the government is against the people because the government doesn't know the people. They know the lobbyists and the money and the changing of hands in political office. They know these things. They don't know you. They don't know me. I mean, they might know some of us, but they don't personally know us.
Okay, this is one of these chapters where I kind of hate it.
And I know you don't like his love of Christendom, but I do think his historical retelling office is relevant. It's just relevant.
Okay, no, but I don't.
Different way.
Okay, one, I don't like his comment about how it's like they believe that they have more freedom under their current regimes than they did under the former. Okay, peak freedom. Peak freedom isn't the former regime that he was claiming. It was the original regime of this current regime. That's the current.
Inherently, any constitutional republic set up like the American Republic will start out with a lot of freedom. Unfortunately, the way that the country has gone, we have a lot less freedom now than we should.
Yes, we have a lot less than we should. But I would make the comment that we have a hell of a lot more freedom than they had at previous points in history still. It's about perspective, because when you think of freedom, okay, things that are dictated. Well, things aren't inherently just dictated by government. They're also dictated by the technology and resources available to you at the time. So if you're looking at it purely from a government perspective, sure, there's rules that we have today that never existed in the past. But a lot of those rules are down to the fact that we have a lot of options and capabilities that never existed before.
I would argue they probably had more privacy too, though, back then. That you generally would not have people snooping around your house or
no, that's a bold-faced lie. You did not have privacy. You had no right to privacy, Chris. If someone wanted to accuse you of a crime, the sheriff could come into your house and investigate every single thing and do a full sweep of your house without.
Okay, but are you talking about United Kingdom or are you talking about the Roman Empire? Because those are two different things.
This guy right here is going back towards Christendom and monarchy. He comes off as a monarchist. In this specific letter, he comes off as a monarchist multiple times, and he comes off as being anti-republic.
I would say though that if you were to look at it from his perspective, because he lives in Canada, if he's living under the current regime in Canada, I think his points are a little more valid than if he's living in America.
I don't see how his current regime is any more tyrannical than a previous regime, if you were on the wrong side of it, was. Example being, okay, the shutting down of your bank accounts. Well, they could come in and just take everything from your property. At any moment they wanted to. Your house was theirs. Everything in it was theirs.
I guess okay, then let's just settle this with this one.
Okay.
Would you argue that a good monarchy is worse than a good republic? Or would they be about equivalent?
A good monarchy versus a good republic. I mean, those are very different.
They're very different structures of government, but if you had a good king versus if you have a good republic. Because a good king will bring about a lot of prosperity for a lot of people.
No, not in the same way. A good republic would inherently be better because the good republic is inherently limited already in what it can do. The problem is with the thing is, in practice, they should be doing the same thing per Machiavelli's The Prince. So,
you think they'd be equivalent? I think your biggest concern is there's too much power in one hand, and it's quicker to deteriorate a monarchy than it is to deteriorate a republic. Is that your argument?
Yes. You're also it's tough because you're talking about the ideal behavior of both. The ideal behavior of government is the same no matter what. You have to ask about the risks, and
you think there's more risks with a monarchy than a republic?
There's more risk with a monarchy because the decisions are down to one person and their pride. So it's far easier for it to deteriorate with the monarch when he's insulted, or he gets a vanity project because he's trying to impress a specific woman and starts taxing people a certain way. Or he wants to be loved by the people, so he spends money a certain way for that instead of doing the prudent thing. Whereas a republic has a better structure at preventing the fancies of one person. We're talking about when it's ideal, right? So that's what the chances for error are less.
Yeah, fair enough. I would argue, I think that a good monarchy, because if you had a good king, I think a good king is better than a good republic. You get more stuff done. But I would agree with you that the risks of a good monarchy turning bad are probably higher.
I mean, I think I'll say this. I think you're biased because in this perspective, because you're thinking of it from how our system is currently set up. Generally speaking, with our specific term limits, but in a good republic, you would have a lot of local delegation. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing that would say that you can't have longer terms of election for the people that are in the local jurisdiction. Like, there's nothing that would stop you from saying this person can be elected for life until the people say they want to unelect him. Like, you could do that method still. It's just that it's not a hereditary title. And it can be, you can have what's the word? I'm blanking right now. Like, you could basically have what's equivalently a recall election for an individual at any time you want it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's nothing that prevents you from being creative on the local jurisdiction without making the top all powerful, because certain local levels and areas will get ignored by the top to subsidize others. So
there is also a discussion in here about how the church, and when he's talking about the church, he's talking about the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
He's talking about how it has strayed from its original path. And this is mostly a commentary, I feel like, on Vatican II. There's a lot of opinions either way on that. That's a theological debate I'm not willing to get into just discussing this book. But that's I think he's alluding to in this part right here. All right. And then after that, you get into... he's talking about how bad of a devil he is in the next chapter. We're in chapter 10. He's talking about how bad of a devil Malthus is. I'm assuming you were done about the monarchy conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of agree on the risks of monarchy.
Yeah, this one, he's just talking about how it's so easy, basically, for devils these days. They're so terrible.
Then he talks about the spreading of the Russian-Soviet view, which is really just talking about the influence of communism, especially on the Western world post-Soviet Union. Yeah. And you get people like Saul Alinsky and those kinds of people who took that approach, especially with unions, and really infected the brains of the American people. And I think that's kind of what he's getting at with this part. People fall in line like the good pseudo-communists they are. Anyway, I can't remember if there's anything else in this chapter worth discussing.
This next chapter is...
Oh, no, here you go. And then he talks about how mothers...
versus not essential.
No, this is where he gets to how men and women can both be influenced in this way, but women especially are more willing to adhere to emotional arguments. Yeah. And so if a kid brings back new beliefs, the mom is more likely to accept those new beliefs without questioning them or to be accepted by the children. Whereas the father, if they put their foot down and push back, I mean, they might get a lot of pushback from the kids too, but dads are less likely to just accept new beliefs from their kids because, experience and being a father and whatnot. It's a different perspective than a mom.
Yeah. What this letter goes into is about how she kind of embraces the COVID
new
stuff.
age and the new age stuff.
Yeah.
Too.
And the new age. Yeah.
I don't think it talks about her embracing.
In number 10, it goes in the one that you're sharing on the page right now is
the essential worker thing.
Essential,
you're right.
And he's not, and then it's like he's already resenting it and she's like in favor of it still because she's feeling special.
It also gets into how when either spouse is feeling ignored, they're more likely to get into petty fights just to be heard.
Yeah.
And this can apply to men and women, but generally speaking, when somebody in a couple feels ignored, it's usually the wife or the mom or whatever you want to refer to her as. And the petty fights won't help with the listening aspect. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean? It's not going to make you want to listen more, but that's like I guess that would be how you talk about the cry for help from the man. This is kind of the cry for help in a relationship from the woman. Yeah. And that's the first time I think you see that. The next chapter, I'm on chapter 12 now for the record. Okay. I guess I skipped a chapter in here somewhere.
You might have. It's fine.
Oh, that's why you're not.
I was talking about 10 still, and you were talking about 11, I guess.
I did. That's why we were just.
You didn't update the one on the screen, Chris.
Sorry, I'm gonna update the screen again.
You're in the actual.
I'm in the physical book here, and I'm trying to keep the digital book and the physical book aligned. Sorry. Okay. So when we get to chapter 12, we're talking more about
he's lying argument. About his unemployment.
Oh, yeah. You find out about the lying about the unemployment. And also you have legit like devil interference where she's having sleep paralysis and like legitimately seeing the devilish nature of the devils and whatnot in her sleep. And so when she's telling him about it, he's just like, you're crazy, go to sleep. Because he probably wants to sleep. But that's not the way you should approach something like that. And then here's where we start to see the alcoholism creep in and become a problem. Because he has lost his job and he's trying to deaden that feeling inside. I don't think there's a whole lot left here, though. Yep, now we're on 13.
The next one is just about how they don't really have a foundation.
Right.
In their beliefs. She's always gone with her feminist stuff on modern society, and he's encouraged it, but then it's like...
He's encouraged it because he doesn't want to be labeled as an anti-feminist person.
Yeah.
Or not willing to be sexist, I guess. That's what it says in here.
Yeah, and this is where they have the whole thing about how they know that this whole COVID thing doesn't have the right amount of patients and all of that stuff. So it's
not equivalent to the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
That's what but they're treating it as if it is.
Yeah, so then it's just the whole thing where they're kind of like living the spirit of the age, I would say.
And then he talks about how anybody who's not following the narrative is giving consequences rivaling that of the Inquisition. That's the way he describes it.
Mm-hmm. And then the next one, they're basically not talking to each other.
Right, because they're in disagreement over how to handle this. And
yeah,
so they're just not talking.
He's gone down to abusing alcoholism and being lazy.
Yeah.
Has he gone into the...
I don't think he's gone past that point yet.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see here. So the other thing here is it's funny because I don't think this is it yet, but there's a point where he discusses how the college degree makes the father feel as if he's better than those who would do labor jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah, he's not accepting certain work.
So he's only willing to take on work that is matching his caliber,
right.
Which is how I would view it. Let's see if it's here yet. Let's see. Okay, so at this point, he finally hits the issue with the lewd, the pornography, the debauchery, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
And they talk about how, and whether you agree or disagree with it, I like the way he talks about this because clearly, if you're a couple and you want to do something together, it's very different from a couple where one spouse is hiding something or an activity from their spouse. Those are two different things. And while I don't condone a couple both agreeing to that, because I don't think it's right personally for people to view those types of images at all. If you're not on board with it with your spouse, then it's even worse.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? And so he's hiding this habit, this habit of his.
Yeah.
And he's calling it moral leprosy, which is a funny way to call it. Happily frolicking in the playground of the damned. This is an interesting way to describe it. But yeah, it's clear that he knows what he's doing is against his wife's wishes. That's right. The first problem. The second problem is whether or not you view his viewing of pornography as a bad thing in the first place, which I do. Those two things together can equal a pretty nasty conscience. And he's probably at a point now where he's feeling pretty pathetic between the alcoholism, the fact that him and his wife are in disunion, and he's doing something that she never approved of, period. It's right. Against what they agreed to as a couple. So those three things on their own are bad enough. And then depending on how you view his viewing of the viewing, that adds an entire another layer to it. It says here's the way I would call it this too: kill himself spiritually all over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I think at this point, I think we can deviate a little bit from going through chapter by chapter, letter by letter, I guess, because
at this point it just keeps going down that path.
Yeah, it just spirals and spirals until eventually.
We'll get to that part now then.
Yeah.
Unless I'm just going to roll through real quick and make sure I didn't miss anything. But I think you're right.
No, there's things we already talked about in passing, in the sense that like there's the report that one of them talks about how they there's resentments in a sense because she wasn't really wanting to be done having kids, but the pressures of society made it seem like him castrating himself was the right thing to do, and he just kind of did it. And he just went and did it kind of in a sense without necessarily having the longer conversation.
But there is the short period of time where the wife starts to feel somewhat of a faithful aspect to her life. And then right before she kind of hits the nail on the head, which is going to confession, that would be the version of coming back to the church if you're Catholic. That's when they hit her with laying it all out there, what the husband's been up to.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. So that's chapter 21? Yeah, so here we go. Yeah. So after the wife starts to come back to some kind of a faith foundation, then you land with the dad's nasty habit coming out in front of the children, which is about as bad as it can get.
Yeah, and then it's one of those things where he has like a whole breakdown. His habit about alcoholism and pornography.
And the loss of his job. I don't remember if that comes out at the same time or not.
Yeah, they all come out at the same time. And there's like a whole scene where it's in front of his kids and everything too, the argument. His son goes down to confront him, but then just finds the screen on with the pornography going. And then has a whole moral crisis in his own right because he didn't look away.
Yeah, he has his own little moral crisis. Yep.
So, I mean, then that spirals. Like I said, we can accelerate the description because it's not as important in this part. It's not as nuanced, I guess. So, like, it goes into this whole thing where he's kicked out. They're separated.
The family is at a point where they cannot afford the house.
Yeah.
And the wife wants a separation. Most likely a divorce is what she requests. I don't remember for sure if he says divorce or not, but the process begins.
And then,
so the father is humiliated, has to move in with his parents.
Yeah.
And then in the process of his wallowing, one last kind of grasp at coming back to some kind of a faith foundation, he finds a job with a farmer who is very Catholic.
Well, he's desperate, so he finds the
work he can get.
Yeah.
And this man has a very strong faith foundation versus the husband, and he has a very put together family, which the father admires. And he feels like, I guess you could put it like this was a divine intervention, because when he gets there, he sees the statue of the Mother Mary, which Andrew doesn't really think is that big of a deal. But for a Catholic, that would be a bigger deal, I suppose.
I was just saying we'll discuss it after.
Fair enough. But basically he has a whole conversion. And then throughout this conversion, he comes back to some kind of faith in the Catholic Church and starts going to church, starts praying. He even prays for, I don't know if you know what a novena is.
He meets up with the teacher too. The old teacher.
But the novena was important, and if you don't know what it had to do with, then you might not understand. Basically, the novena was praying for his children. Specifically, was praying for his children.
There was a thing about Latin Mass in this book too.
Yeah, that was the whole Vatican II thing. It was basically like, Vatican II brought in the new order of the Mass, which is a bad thing, and Latin is strong, and da-da-da-da. Yeah, it's a whole thing, but it didn't necessarily need to be in this book. The only thing I could say that would affect is a lot of if you were Catholic during COVID, you would notice that a lot of the Latin masses came back faster or never stopped, whereas a lot of your modern mass, the new mass, Novus Ordo, those ones shut down longer, generally speaking, as a rule. So there's some value to that discussion. I just don't know if it needed to be in this book.
Yeah. I mean, and then the rest of this is really just him keep building his relationship with his family, as he was no longer the same man. He had, reconstructed his life, kicked his
completely
bad
reconstructed his life.
Yeah. I mean, redemption, it was a redemptive arc for the father. And then he goes and he's now practicing in the faith and everything, and takes his son to church once or twice. Well, takes his son to go work on the farm as well, just to get out of the school the way it was being handled during that time frame. And the family rekindles their relationship and comes back stronger because of it.
Exactly.
Yep. That's basically the gist of the last multiple letters. Nothing super fancy in there, I would say. It's what everyone would expect from a redemption arc.
Which is good, because when I was reading this the first time and I didn't know that redemption arc was coming, I was like, where is this going? Right. I was like, oh no, this is getting worse and worse and worse. Like it was almost like you get to the point of like,
you're wondering, well, it's either going to have a redemption arc or it's going to have a suicide. It's one of the two. Yeah, that's really what the story is.
There's like no other option with this story than those two things. Oh man. Which I will agree with you. The cry for help from the man was entirely ignored in this book at the end, and the wife missed it entirely. Like his sinning and everything else, it's all a cry for help.
That's where I wish the author had done better commentary.
Yeah, I think that there's a missing chapter in here where the exploration of the man's psyche would have been good.
Not just that though, but like the explanation of how the whole thing is to make it where when he has, like, their goal should have been described as making it where when he does have that cry for help, it is ignored by everybody, because that right there would have been that was like the first redemption opportunity for the husband. But it was since it's completely ignored, it comes off as though like the author through these demons is just describing him as like inherently pathetic and weak. When, I mean, okay, I get that portion, but I feel like it's not doing a service to what the actual issue was. Right? It's a lack of grace from the other people involved in that moment. It's not necessarily, there's nothing wrong with someone having that breakdown, right? It's that person in that moment is theoretically accepting that they are wrong.
The things leading up to the breakdown were wrong, but the breakdown itself shows that he recognizes he made a mistake.
And that's what I'm saying. Like it
allows the redemption arc to occur.
Yeah, if he refused to accept any fault, that's way worse than
him breaking
having that breakdown, because that breakdown is him inherently recognizing he's wrong. That's a good thing.
The breakdown shows his humility.
Yeah.
He is humbled and also like just laid out bare for his entire
that's hitting rock bottom, right?
And for a family man, yes.
Well, that's rock bottom. That's rock bottom in general. Like that was rock bottom before anything else, because that was like right there, the pinnacle of the bottom. And that right there is the time that he needed someone to reach out and help him. So
it's clearly the wife is stuck in the new age feminism too far that she doesn't see it.
Yeah, and that's why I'm disappointed in. That's one of the letters I'm disappointed in, really, because I feel like he misses the opportunity to describe how someone should be looking to give grace.
You wish that the devils had revealed the scheme they had played with the wife and the man in that moment, where they point out all the faults of the woman too.
Yes. How the whole design there is to make it where he has that and no one's there to grab his hand. Like
to point out
no one's there to help him up, to lift, like to help him after he's just fallen. You know what I'm saying? Like
you're saying that if he had added an extra paragraph describing this specific thing, it would
that
make
letter
it
would
stronger.
be 1,000 times better if he did.
It would make it an even stronger argument.
Because in this one, it comes off kind of. It doesn't come off as a strategy. It comes off almost as if he himself, the author, views that man as inherently pathetic, almost irredeemable. Like the demons describe it in a way, to me, that came off as though this man is viewed as just inherently irredeemable, and it's not a strategy for them. It's just a fact. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I can kind of see your perspective on this one. I think there's definitely some chapters that if he had expanded them a little bit, they could have been way stronger than they were.
Yeah, I mean, and that's my only complaint. It's not that I have a complaint with the fact that it happens in the story.
Well, it has to happen or the redemption arc can't.
Exactly. It's the fact that the author in that moment misses something that is super key to describing the redemption arc.
I definitely think that he has some biases towards weak men.
He does. That's my point, is he has a bias against weak men.
And because of that,
but
he misses some points that could have been expanded.
But I think that that's also like a hubristic thing by the author.
It could be
a little bit. I think he views himself as better than, and like that could never happen to him.
So I actually don't. I would, because I know the character of the author. I know that's not the case. He recognizes that all of us are weak.
Yeah, I can get that, but I'm saying in that moment when he's writing that letter, he himself has no grace for that, for his own creation of his character.
I think the other perspective you have to look at is, and this is not a perspective that most people would know unless you know who the author is. During the time that he's writing this, he is in the same boat as the teacher that gets fired. He got fired during the writing of this story. Or maybe not fired, but told not to come back, essentially. And so, like, he may have had some biases there, especially against whatever families.
I'm just saying his biases show in certain aspects of this book, where that's something like, okay, because I have only one thing to compare it to, truly, and that's Screwtape Letters. That's why it's a poor man's Screwtape Letters. It's not. There's biases that you don't see biases in Lewis's Screwtape Letters. Not really.
Whereas Screwtape Letters is written in a little more timeless fashion, this one is more of a snapshot of a time period that really does lay it all out there at how we want. Like, honestly, this would be a good book to read before the next election to remind people.
Maybe. I mean,
anyway.
Well, okay, I was just saying he has some takes that are very much personal to him, I think.
I would agree. His biases are there.
Yeah.
He is who he is.
Because there's certain things that I don't inherently think are sinful that he has described as sin. It's about how you do it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, I know you have the opinion because your viewpoint is very libertarian. And I don't know if you describe yourself as libertarian because that's a very specific set of ideals.
I mean,
sure. You're open to a lot more things than the average person.
Well, the sin. Okay, when you look at sin in the Bible,
sin is an action.
Sin is an action, but it's
or a thought process. There can be thought processes that are.
But they're all derived from the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
Okay.
Generally speaking, yes.
Generally speaking, sins are derived from the 10 Commandments. So if not all things cause people to do the same thing in a way that will make it where you're violating one of the 10 Commandments. You know what I'm saying? Like, not everyone who drinks caffeine gets addicted to caffeine.
True.
Right? But there's people out there, the Mormons will say drinking caffeine's a sin. We can debate if Mormons are Christian or not, but that's a different. I'm just using it as an example.
If caffeine leads you to behave in a way that is bad for your family, it could be sinful. It could be. I could see that.
Now, there's people who will say that all alcohol, that's why it's a dry county. Well, alcohol is not inherently bad. Alcohol is something that a lot of people can drink. Now, do you go and overindulge in it because that activity can be sinful? If you worship alcohol as an idol, that's sinful,
especially
right?
if you idolize the behavior that you exhibit on alcohol.
But the thing is, drinking alcohol itself is not a sin. It's
Jesus did
how
it.
and it's about you as an individual and how you handle it, how you treat the activity. Like, okay, video games. There's people who are addicted to it, or a vape pen, or cigarettes, whatever it is. Like, people can be addicted to anything out there. Anything can become their idol. Your cell phone can become your idol.
Oh yeah,
It's
that
one
happens to
of
people.
Yeah. It's one if it's a thing that impacts your daily life where it's dominating your thought process and impairing your other relationships and what your duties are, then it's sinful, yes. But like, that is not a one size fits all thing. And that's why I personally don't prescribe to a lot of things as inherently sinful, where I know other people do. So
I know there are definitely some things that flat out, no matter how you do them or where you get them from, they are inherently sinful.
give me an
It's a
example,
very
Chris.
short. Well, I would argue that
It's a very short list. Yes. Okay.
it's a very short list. I would argue that I would argue that pornography could be sinful in any case. I would argue that.
Question.
Well, because it goes against one of the 10 Commandments, flat out.
Okay, I can come up with a scenario where it's not.
Well, I would say that these okay. I guess it depends on how broad your definition is. If you're saying that the statues in like museums in Rome that are just happen to be nude included, then sure, you could argue those few things in the Roman museums would not be classified as a sin to look at.
I mean, I could go even further down the lewdness here, Chris, and ask the question. It's like, if your significant other does something for you that's not cheating or anything, it's like literally just them making you content, and it's only you viewing it. Is that considered pornography? Because technically,
I would say yes.
Okay, is it considered sinful?
But it
Because
really,
you're lusting only after your significant other, who you're married to.
inherent. Okay, so that's a deeper discussion, and I've read a whole book on
I
that.
know. I'm just
And
saying.
I would say that
it's a gray area, Chris.
Intent matters.
Yeah.
But I would argue that I would not request that of my significant other for the exact reasons that you're citing are gray. I would never request that.
I understand.
I would say it can be. It absolutely can be, and it's a trap that you could fall into.
And I'm just making the point that it's
and
gray.
I would say that yes, it probably
and that would be
is
considered
sinful.
That'd be considered pornography, and
I would argue that
not inherently sinful though.
I would argue it probably is, but it depends on, like I said, it depends on intent, and there's a lot of other factors. But
I mean, I think there's a lot of consequences that could come of doing the activity, but that thing itself is not necessarily sinful per se. Just saying it's great.
I would argue it probably is.
It could be debated.
I would argue it probably is, but
you could be right. I'm just saying it's a thing that could be debated. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, but I would say you're arguing the exception in an argument where I think you mostly agree with me.
I do completely agree. I'm playing devil's advocate. Don't worry. I'm playing devil's advocate, Chris.
Okay,
I do mostly agree with you on this. Don't like. All right. I would never ask.
But that's what I'm saying. There's a short list of things that no matter what you do or how you do them, I think are flat out would be sin in all cases.
I mean, do you have another?
Or at least 99.9% of cases. That's one of them, and I think that's why it drives this book so hard into the depths. I think addiction in most cases, if not all cases, is sinful because it leads to gluttony. Addiction is gluttony.
Addiction though is a personal thing. That's not a specific substance thing.
If you recognize addiction and you keep going,
help.
I mean, I think addiction is most.
I mean, addiction stems though from a personal emptiness. That's really where it stems from. So it's like, if you're a person who is
I would say sacrifices to Moloch are inherently sinful, no matter how they're done.
No shit, Chris. Sacrifices are murder, so let's just go with that.
Oh man. Trying to think of what
I'm just saying the list of things, like activities that are inherently sinful, it's
a pretty short list.
It's very short. That's all I'm saying. And there's a lot of people out there who don't treat it that way.
If somebody functions, and this is probably a short list of people who can do this, but if somebody were to do hard drugs and function normally and not damage their family, then it's probably not sinful, but it's dangerous behavior that could lead to sinful behavior.
Yeah. It is.
The thing is I know you talked about this a lot. You're like, okay, the hard drugs thing, like, okay, you're going to war and you take cocaine, like whatever.
Dude, no, I mean, like literally half of the stimulants were designed for soldiers in combat to stay awake. Meth was used by soldiers in World War II.
Oh, World War II, okay.
Yeah, World War II. That's how the Nazis took over Paris so damn fast. Like they took a crap ton of meth and went over the French borders. So, I mean, it's just all drugs that have ever been invented have all been invented for a specific purpose. And I think we forget that they were made for a specific purpose. So opioid were always painkillers. So like stimulants were always performance enhancers.
Mm.
It's one of those things where we also have this thing where these are all inherently terrible for your health, but we also have had them illegal, and they're the quality of it made in the back alley by gang members versus the product made in a high grade lab for medicinal uses is very different in what's included in it. So I think we have a very distorted view on it that makes it all seem extremely more sinful than it is.
So what you're saying is all drugs are made with a purpose.
You can get prescribed medical grade meth.
It's the abuse of drugs that lead to sinful behavior is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's human nature. It's human behavior that leads to sin. It's not a specific
the fallen
activity.
Nature of humans is what leads to it, huh? Okay. I mean, I could agree with that. The fallen nature of man is what leads to the sinful behavior on drugs.
I mean, when you go to the 7 deadly sins, right? Like the reason they're broad is because it's about how you execute your behavior. It's not about the activity itself.
Did you see the text from Will?
No.
He said, how'd the podcast go? And I would argue it went better than I expected.
Well, we're still going.
Yeah. Yeah, we should probably tell him that.
Moving beyond that thing about the personal takes, though, like there was one part in here where he flat out just says that Luther was inspired by demons.
Well, okay, I would argue that inherently.
And wait, one second.
Go ahead.
And he kind of takes a perspective where all criticism of the Catholic Church is demonic inspiration. And then that annoyed me because I don't give a crap. I don't give a crap what institution you are. Okay? You can't even read the Bible and see the old, priesthood class of the Old Testament without recognizing that corruption and individuals who act in ways that are not with God is an inherent thing with all institutions.
Okay, I have two
that are made out of men. One second.
All right. Roll through your points. I got two counterpoints.
I know. And my point with that is he, in doing so, is actually guilty of a sin himself for hubristic pride in his institution that he can't even recognize their own flaws. So
so the Luther one. I have a
you have a note?
I have a quip for you on this one. What? You said you're mad about him saying that Luther was influenced by demons. Well, he literally says he was, because he talks about flinging poo at them and them flinging poo back. So, like, if that doesn't count as an influence, I don't know
No,
what
okay,
does.
but he's saying like Protestantism, his whole point in the book is to say that Protestantism is a product of demons, like demonic purpose.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say 100% that's the case, but I will say this. I think the biggest flaw in criticism of the Catholic Church is they criticize individuals within the church and pretend like that's the whole institution. And I would argue that those kind of arguments are demonic in nature because you're arguing against not the belief system or the foundation, but you're saying individual does this, institution bad. And that's the bulk of arguments against the Catholic Church. That's
No, I mean, Chris, it's okay. It's not that institution bad. It's institution has too much power is structured bad to allow the empowerment of this person to do too much wrong.
Well, I would just say if you look at the entire history of the Bible, anything instituted by God has had what I'll call problem children, but that doesn't make the institution as instituted by God bad. It means that the individual at the time was bad.
I mean, you could make the comment that there's the grand architecture of how the church is structured is not necessarily what was intended, compared to communities having. When you read
now you're
Paul's
debating theology.
letters,
Now you're debating theology again.
I know. I'm just saying when you read Paul's letters, I'm just saying you might.
There's a lot of interpretation and misinterpretation of what Paul said or didn't say, and I'm not open to having that conversation.
That's not on here. I know.
This book.
I'm just saying that there's ways for me to say that the institution might not be bad completely, but it might not also be exactly what was intended. Is all I'm saying.
You have your opinion.
I know.
I disagree with it, but you have your opinion.
I did. Okay, there was one point we forgot to mention in here.
Yep.
Which was valid. I forget at what point he did it, but he had a whole thing about medicating boys and labeling them as faulty.
Oh yeah, that's a problem. That's what
which is something that I have touched on before.
Hey, I think that's a good point he brings up for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember, I talked about it as one of the fourth turning issues.
It was, yeah. You did talk about that. I forgot about that.
So it's one of those things that I will always support anyone complaining about that. There is a lot of focus on Mary in this. I'm just going to flat out say that. I feel like there's not a lot of explicit call-outs of Jesus, which is odd given the intent of the book.
I mean, okay.
Explicit. I'm saying explicit. Okay.
No. Here, you got to hear me out for a second on this. So yes, there's a lot of Mary in the book. The thing is that all of the things related to Mary in the book should lead a practicing Catholic to Jesus and the church.
Which is my complaint about the book.
Because now, the thing is like if you take it to the nth degree, what is one of her most important lines in the Bible? It's literally do what he says, talking about Jesus, right? Okay. So that's what a lot of things.
1 second, Chris. 1 second. 1 second.
Okay. Now he's not going to grab a lot of non-Catholics with that.
That's my point. Is what is the purpose of this book? And if his purpose of the book is to be specifically to a niche group of Catholics,
then he nailed it.
Then he nailed it perfectly. If he wanted to create a deeper thought book, a thought-provoking book for a wider population,
the C.S. Lewis approach.
The C.S. Lewis approach, which would be considered entertaining even to a non-Christian, even beyond a Protestant Catholic divide, to a non-Christian altogether. He does not achieve that because he doesn't cast a wide net. Yes, he doesn't take the broadly Christian approach to this, because that's the beauty of the Screwtape Letters, is even the way it's so broadly Christian, but in a way that is more ethics based, I think.
There's a lot of ethics related to the Screwtape Letters. Yes, I would say that even somebody just looking for good morals could find it in the Screwtape Letters without necessarily being
Christian. Because even a non-practicing Christian, right? A just a Western civilization individual would still view the influence that is causing you to make bad decisions as like a little devil on your shoulder.
Yeah.
Because that's just something that's culturally ingrained. So there's a way to write it where it does just come off as like, this is my worst nature, and make it appealing, but then sprinkle in there the things that would draw someone to read the next book. You know what I'm saying? Like this is clearly not the same like entryway story that Screwtape Letters is to even a non-practicing like an atheist type person, agnostic.
So here was something I thought you would enjoy, though. I'm surprised you didn't bring it up. What was the gift the farmer gave to the son? Do you remember?
To the son?
To the son, yep. After he brought the son to work with him.
I don't remember.
The Bible, literally the Bible.
Okay.
The book he refers to it as.
It was.
I thought that was good.
That was good. There's a moment where he pretends that the Inquisition was overblown.
Well, I did briefly touch on that earlier. But he did bookmark it to a specific page in the book.
There's a specific page where he says that they pray to Mary.
I actually don't recall this part.
Page 83.
83.
Yeah. He explicitly has the call out of praying to Mary. I wrote it down just because.
Right, I'm looking. Let's see. Wait, 80. Wait, what?
83.
Where?
Page 83.
Where how am I not seeing this on page 83?
1 second.
Praying on her knees to the terrible woman. Oh, okay. Hold on.
Yeah. Praying on their knees to the terrible woman.
Yeah, I mean, for intercession. I mean, you're not the prayer is it's an intercessory prayer. Same, and that's what I was going to bring up. That's what I was going to bring up to you, though. Hold on. And besides that, the Lady's Psalter is the Rosary, which is the meditations we talked about before.
There's
and they're all meditations on the life of
here's
Jesus.
One I did not like as a non-Catholic. He has a whole bit in there in one of the letters about where he talks about a dead relative's suffering being the cause of the children's faith.
Well, I mean, if you believe in guardian angels, there's no reason
no one else's suffering grants you faith. That comes off as some collective salvation bullshit to me.
It's not, but it's not. It's intercessory prayer for your relatives.
No, it's literally.
You're asking for extra help for your kids.
No, it's not even. It's not even someone that they knew. It's someone long gone.
No, it talks about the grandma knowing the kids.
Like briefly, the kids aren't praying to her for intercession or anything.
No,
she's just there doing it. Like
the thing about intercessory prayer is nobody here's the thing.
But it's also
I don't have a deep theology on intercessory prayer, I'll be honest with you.
But wait though. It's not just that. It's about the fact that she dedicated her suffering and death to them and their faith. And it's just like okay. That's one of those things where it's like, okay, bud. That's not exactly how it works. That's like buying an indulgence for someone in purgatory. That's not how it works.
Well, that's different. But and you cannot. So the confusion about indulgences, especially in the church in Germany during that time period, was they were selling indulgences for already dead people who were condemned, and you can't indulge yourself out of hell.
Yeah, but what I'm telling you,
that's the confusion.
Okay, what I'm trying to say is, okay, you're dying a death of cancer, and it sucks. It's terrible. I get it, but you can't. Where is this principle that you can dedicate that suffering to another person, to saving another person?
I mean, that's literally what Jesus does on the cross.
That's Jesus forgiving the sins by dying for the sins. This woman is already effing dying, Chris. She's
So
not
she's dedicating her
sacrificing.
suffering
No,
to.
she's not. That's not how this works. She was already going to die.
I'm not. Here's the thing. I'm not going to claim.
Died explicitly because of his actions towards forgiving our sins. She's dying because she's sick. She didn't go out there and nail herself to a damn cross willfully to save them. She's already dying and being like, hey, let me tag on this request.
I mean, I would argue prayer is powerful, and
yes, prayer is powerful.
Unless you are literally God, you don't know how the prayer works.
Prayer is powerful, but you can't. You just no.
If I pray for my children now or on my deathbed, my prayers should help them.
You can't save them with your prayer.
No, I mean, maybe I can help. Okay, here's the thing. If you have intercessory, if you believe in intercessory prayer, then you believe that prayers can be used for intercession and potentially provide some kind of protection for your children. If you don't believe in intercessory prayer, then fine. Then you don't believe in it. Who cares? Stop arguing about it.
I'm just saying. I'm just pointing it out as one of those things that he takes.
It could turn some people off if they don't believe in intercessory prayer.
Yes, I'm saying he takes some very strongly.
Now, the one thing that I want to point out that I think even for somebody who is a versed Catholic, such as myself, he really, really should have explained why in the heck he had the dad praying a novena based on Saint Monica. Because if you don't know who the heck Saint Monica is, which by the way was the mother of Saint Augustine who prayed for her son's conversion, and it eventually happens. It's the prayer for lost children.
Yes, and my point is, you can point that one out right there. I'm saying he goes really, really hard on the Catholic stuff.
That was my biggest complaint, because like when he said that, I was like, okay, now I got to look up what this novena is.
I know, and I'm saying that's my complaint, because it's not even to the wider audience of Catholics. It's like a niche group of Catholics even that he's targeting with this book a little bit.
In some places, I think
okay, but
your standard traditional Catholic could read this no problem.
Okay, he has a whole thing about the Vatican II versus Latin Mass thing.
He's not out. He's not. That's my assumption is what he meant.
No, because he has a whole thing about Latin in this.
He does, yes.
In one of the letters. And, okay, I'm sorry, controversial opinion here. Controversial opinion. I honestly do not understand the obsession with Latin Mass, because I honestly...
Have you ever been to one?
Dude.
I'm just curious.
I have heard in Latin before, yes.
Have you been to a Latin... I'm just curious.
Not in forever. I've definitely been to one when I was younger with my dad. My comment is this, Chris. My comment is this. To me, it comes off kind of like a mysticism novelty right now, because Latin is a dead language that no one ever freaking hears. So they go, and it brings the feeling of ritualistic religion. It brings the feeling like I don't know how to describe it, but ritualistic religion. It makes you feel like you're doing something ritualistic because it's reserved for this. It's like an enchantment vibe, okay? Like it comes off like that more than it being something specifically special, because it's still words. It's freaking words, and it would go completely against the whole concept of what speaking in tongues was supposed to be, where everyone could understand you no matter what language they spoke. When you spoke, they all understood you perfectly in their own tongue.
Speaking in Latin is not Latin. Speaking in tongues.
No, I'm saying, saying that Latin Mass is specifically special, inherently special, goes contrary to the concept of people in the Bible who spoke in tongues and communicated the word to everybody because they all heard it in their own language.
I mean, right? This is a debate I did not expect to get into on this channel, but
I'm just saying
the main arguments for the Latin Mass are that when all the masses are using the same language, it's a universal, everything's the same. You can go anywhere, it's the same thing. There's no misunderstanding, there's no miscommunication, because everybody's saying the same words in the same way at the same parts of the Mass.
That's just a complaint about a shitty translation. That's it. It's not, the Latin itself is not special.
It is. Well, the other half of it is that the church did it that way for roughly anywhere between 500 to 1500 years, depending on where you draw the origin of it from.
Okay, I'm just going to say this. If someone does not know Latin, they don't understand Latin. Going
that
to
doesn't
Latin,
matter. It's there. The
yes,
prayers.
It does.
You don't. Honestly, it does not actually matter if you know Latin.
Dude,
like if somebody, let's put it this way. If I go to Brazil, it's probably a terrible option for you because you're going to be thinking about other things. But if I go to Brazil and somebody speaks a different language and they want to pray with me, if we both know the prayers in Latin, regardless of our level of understanding of Latin, we can pray together.
I'm just going to say that
it's considered the universal language of the Catholic Church.
If someone doesn't know what is even going on, like, I don't know, man.
Then they have a bad formation in their catechism.
Yeah, I'm just making the comment that if they don't actually know the Latin words that are being spoken.
Well, here's the other thing. When you go to a Latin mass, most people, if not everybody, will have what's called the Roman Missal, as the English and the Latin side by side. You can follow along, no problem.
I don't see what makes the Latin. I don't see what makes the Latin mass special.
Well, it is. There's a lot of things to it, but one of them is it takes you out of the day to day. You're not in English. You're in Latin. You go there, you recognize right away that yes, this is something special.
But my point is this, Chris. The reason there's a Latin mass to begin with is because Latin was the language of the day to day.
It was back then. I'm not disagreeing with you,
which means
it became the language of the church.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is though, the intent of that prayer isn't to be kept behind this language that is no longer the day to day. It's literally meant to be the language of day to day. It's not meant to be fancy like that. I'm just saying that more people are all about Latin Mass. To me, I interpret it as because of the mysticism / novelty of the Latin.
I would argue that it depends on your intention by attending that Mass. Are you attending that Mass and making an idol of tradition, or are you attending that Mass because that Mass is what brings you closer to God?
Yeah, and I feel like personal opinion, a lot of the influencer crowd that has gone all out in for Latin Mass, to me, comes off as though they are making an idol out of the ritual.
There, you could also make an idol out of the new Mass too by claiming that it is superior.
I didn't say it's superior. I just said that there's nothing special.
I'm just saying, like, realistically, you can make an idol out of anything.
You can.
And that is the danger of the human condition. We are just inherently fallen in a way that we can make idols out of everything.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
Some people make idols out of their children. In fact, a lot of people do.
A lot of people do.
Some people make idols out of, I don't know. People make idols out of video games. That happens. Yeah. That's a danger. People make idols out of authors.
You've seen how many Star Wars nerds there are out there on the internet.
There are people that can recite the entire history of Star Wars and not know a single page of the Bible.
Hey, man, think of how many people learned Elvish.
Yes.
Okay.
Tolkien invented his own form of idol worship on accident.
Yes.
Because people are obsessed with him.
I'm just saying, like, the recent obsession over Latin Mass is just one of those things where it's just like, okay, I mean,
I would argue though that the bulk of people are attending it. They're not making a big deal out of it. They recognize that it is the massive, quote unquote, the Mass of the Ages, and that everybody prior to Vatican II attended that Mass. And so if that helps them in their faith to go to that, or some people even believe that there are errors in the new Mass, like if that's how you feel, then definitely attend the Mass where you believe it's real. Like if it's real, it's real.
It comes down specifically to the motivation, but
I would agree. Yeah, it absolutely does.
He describes it in the one letter was as if it was like inherently special because it's Latin.
Well, what can you give me the chapter? I'm just
I don't
curious
remember on this one.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna look up Latin real quick then and see if we can find it in here.
Because it's one of those things where it's always about how special Latin is. That's one of the things I found.
0 results.
What the hell? No, it's totally in here.
Huh?
I don't understand what it's searching for because he totally mentions the Latin.
Maybe it's only looking on this page. I wonder if I'm not searching the whole book.
Because you remember seeing Latin in here, don't you?
I know that it maybe. Let me see with language.
Maybe he doesn't explicitly.
He doesn't call it Latin. He says ancient language.
Yeah.
Who actively advocate against the ancient languages. Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is like the more time you translate something, the more likely you're gonna find error. So like, even I just look at the Bible translations, for example.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
There's a lot of issues with modern Bible translations.
I agree. I was just saying that the way, because that speaks to another thing where, because his take on this is going to be controversial. Even my point down here is he's going for a niche audience, like the niche of niche, even in Catholic circles.
It's less niche than you think, but it's more niche than, say, like broad Christianity.
I'm saying that it's okay. Yes, it's bigger than one would think, but it's still like what percent of the Catholic population would you say it is?
It's anywhere. I guess it depends on how. Okay, anywhere between 5% and 25% could be interested in this book.
And my point is that
just the Catholics,
the percentage of Catholics in America and Canada and the UK, because this is an English book, and Australia and New Zealand, the Anglosphere, the percentage of Catholics is already like what percent of the population?
It's well, I mean, if you look worldwide,
no. The book's in English, so his primary audience is going to be Anglosphere.
I don't know what. I'll be honest. I haven't looked up the percentage of Catholics in that area yet. I don't know what it is.
Well, I'm sure the U.S. has the largest one.
I can tell you that the amount of reviews for this book is pretty low. I can tell you that. I don't remember how many, but it was not many. Although maybe his original version, I didn't check the original version. I didn't even think about that. Hold on. Let me see how many reviews he has in the original version.
1 second. I'm trying to find out what percentage of America is.
Okay, so he has 80 on his original version. He has 83 reviews. Okay, so that's more already than I thought. And then Lockdown. Let me see what Lockdown with the Devil. How many that one had. I know this is not his most popular book, but I really liked this one. Okay, so and then the newer version, Lockdown with the Devil, has 6 reviews. So I mean, he's got less than 100 reviews so far. I mean, that doesn't mean that he's only sold 100 copies. That just means only 100 people have bothered to review it.
Okay, it says 62 million people
in this area
in the U.S.
I mean, I would argue that the potential audience is anywhere between 5 and 15 million. It depends on how many like traditional people identify as traditional Catholics
at any given time. About 18% of the U.S. population.
Okay.
But I would just say that I think a large percentage of that would still be like Hispanics who might not read in English.
Most people in this country read in English at this point. I mean, you can't go to the public schools without at least knowing some English. But
I'm talking about like the first generation immigrants who might not read in English.
I would find it hard to believe that
would still be a decent chunk of the Hispanic immigrant.
Now you're getting into an entirely different argument. I guess your argument is how niche is this? I would argue that at a minimum.
Okay, no. It says
bare minimum audience is at least 1 million people could read this.
In 2020, 18. Okay. I'll round up. 19% of the population in the United States was Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, 62 million people.
Okay.
Now,
And you're niching it down from there.
You're niching it down to like 5% of that, 5 to 20% of that.
I would argue somewhere around at the minimum, the audience that he could be talking to is at
so it's like 5% of the U.S. population
ish.
Tops 5% of the U.S. population.
Anywhere between 1% and 5%.
Yeah. So I'm just saying it's a very
Yeah, I guess so. Your question is if this book is intended to convert people, it's not going to. That's your argument.
Not even to convert, just to like.
And you're saying that if he's looking for broad, you're saying he's going to harden Pharaoh's heart with this book.
Kind of, actually, I think so. Because like I was like I got annoyed with him, and I'm pretty open-minded, Chris.
I'm not arguing you're not open-minded. I think you're going to enjoy the Taylor Marshall Sword and Serpent trilogy more, but I think after having this discussion with you, I can understand how somebody who does not have or that does not identically share my perspective might find this book less inviting, less welcoming than I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's not helped by the fact that it can only be compared to the Screwtape Letters.
Which is a masterpiece in writing.
Yes. Which is why the fact that he goes so niche makes it that much more apparent.
But you would agree, though, that there are quite a few parts in this book you did like. You just did not feel like you were part of the target audience.
I just don't think it. The problem is that the people who need to hear those points aren't
going to read it.
Let me put it this way. The thing he's trying to convey with this book, right? The people who he's trying to reach the perspective of. Like, otherwise, this is just a self-aggrandizing.
You think he's preaching to the choir because the people who read it already agree?
It's a circle jerk book when he gets so niche like this, because the people who he needs to reach out to over the more nuanced, important for people to understand perspectives that we already talked about, like the.
So you think if I walked to, like, okay, let's put it this way: if I went to a Catholic mass and handed this book out after the mass to people, you think most people would read it and be offended?
Not offended, but they would definitely feel like he was. Even among your average Catholics, they're going to recognize that it's a niche author and think that he's a bit extreme. I think because of certain things he chooses to do, he comes off as an extremist even among Catholics.
Okay, I mean, I can see your perspective.
Okay, but you have to agree with some of the topics in here.
I think that he does get a little niche with his book. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. I think he makes a lot of good points.
Because think of how contentious.
I just think that some of his points, because of. I mean, you're right. This is not a broad audience book.
Yeah. I was just saying, think of how contentious the Latin Mass itself is. Just that alone.
It shouldn't be. It really shouldn't
be. But is it not a hugely contested thing right now?
It has become difficult.
Especially among what you would say is a normie Catholic.
Normie Catholics don't care about the Latin Mass. It's just a fact. Normie Catholics don't care.
But it's the type of thing that they would roll their eyes about when someone's saying.
Well, good Lord, you're still going. Yeah, I mean, it's a niche topic that people who go to it would care a lot more than people who don't.
Exactly.
All right. So I think we should rate this book. We're at 1 hour and 43 minutes.
I know. This for such a small book, there's so many.
It's got a lot in here. This thing is packed to the brim with things to talk about.
It is.
When you look at it from the aspect of an author who most likely lost his job during the writing of this,
a little bit of bitterness will write. Yes, I get it.
There's a lot of things that he was probably going through his head as he's writing this.
Yeah, for sure.
I would not want to be locked down with the devil. Yes, Will. Flat out, we don't want to be locked. And I will say, I'm happy he changed the title to this, because every time I would open up the Kindle version, which is titled Family Be Damned, I'm just like, I hate this title.
Well, honestly, if that one, if it had a negative outcome, then that would have been a good title.
Yeah. Well, yes. If the end of the book is the dad signing up for the maid program in Canada, yes.
Oh gosh. Oh, he should have. Oh, that would have been a better book.
No, it wouldn't have.
That would have been a
I
better
prefer the
book.
redemption arc. Is this by C.S. Lewis? No, it is not. It's by Kennedy Hall.
I'm sorry, that
I
might
would
have
say
been a
okay,
more
so
provocative book. I'm sorry, but like,
that could have been a book. I don't like it for this book. Anyways,
couldn't you have just been signing up and then rescued at the last minute? I feel like
he
that would have
could
been
have
the
sure he could have. All right, let me just give. Okay, so my review as a I would describe myself as a pseudo traditional Catholic. I'm definitely leaning that route. I really like this book. I would give it at least a 4.
I'm thinking. This moment of silence is me having to put aside biases a
Andrew
little
doesn't
bit.
want to give it too much credit, but he also doesn't want to undermine the value that is there.
Yes, that's really the debate in my head. I have a little devil and a little angel on my shoulder right now.
You're a
I
little
would
bit
have to
locked.
give.
You're a
I would
little bit
have to give.
locked down with the devil here.
I'd have to give it a 2 still. It'd get a 2.
Because you're not like, I'll be honest, you're not like I feel like you're not the audience.
I'm not the audience. I'm a Protestant. I guess I would say I'm a Protestant. I think it's niche even to Catholics, which is why I'm going to like even among Catholics. I think it's niche.
Are
So
you giving it? Are you giving
I'm
it?
going to give it a 3.
Are you giving it the 2 based on the
I think he has.
content or the audience, the lack of broad audience?
I have to give it a 2 instead of a 3 because of the lack of broad audience. Because for every valid, very good point he has that I agree with, he has something that is, I guess I would say, polarizing in like a negative way for someone who would otherwise agree with his writing.
You
And
almost like his argument.
he
You agree with his
undermines
argument,
himself
but you
throughout.
don't like how he defends his argument.
Yeah, like it's like when someone has a valid point, but they pick the worst way to argue it. They're like, okay, I don't necessarily agree with how you argued it, but yes, you got to the right solution.
You're angry because they chose. It's almost like when Ben Shapiro's labeled as a conservative into a debate, and you're like, if you were a conservative, you're like, you wouldn't want him to be the representative for that debate.
Yes.
Like that's kind of
Yes.
how you look at it.
Yeah, basically.
Or like if you're a liberal and Destiny's the representative on Lex Fridman, you're like, no, I don't want him representing all liberals in this debate on this wide audience.
Yeah, basically. How do you find the 2 least likable representatives for a debate? Those 2.
I would not argue that Kennedy is the least likable guy. I would say that maybe his arguments.
No, I'm saying his arguments. You're saying like the 2
you're saying
people,
the
like, those are
arguments.
equivalent to the arguments.
Yes,
Um,
that's what you're saying. I was trying to
I'm not
find a way
saying
to
he
define
is. I'm
your.
saying his arguments are the equivalent to the 2 least. Yeah.
You did not agree with or like the way he defended his arguments, despite maybe agreeing with them on the outset.
Yeah, and well, also I feel like he drops the ball on a couple of those because of his biases while he's writing it. Like that one moment, like where the true moment to try to save the father is,
and the wife totally abandons him.
Yeah, like I feel like that moment is not given the
level of details you wanted for the devil's scheming.
Not just that, but it's not given the
Did you feel like it was anticlimactic?
It was anticlimactic, but in a way where it wasn't given the seriousness that it was due. Right? Because that's like a really big moment in the success factors of the devils in accomplishing what they're trying to accomplish. And I don't think that it was fully fleshed out in the series, like for the full scope that it deserved to be, to actually explain it to the average reader. He almost misses it, you know? Yeah, I have to do the 2 because I also don't think the writing is such a top tier writing to like bump it up either.
The only reason it's not a 5 for me is because I recognize now some of the nicheness to this writing, and the train wreck in my mind goes on a little too long before it finally redeems itself.
It does drag on the train wreck a little bit. I will agree to that. Yes.
Those are my only like real complaints.
From that, so.
Yeah. But those are my only real. Those two complaints aside, I give it a 4.
Yeah, and I mean, when we split the difference, it brings it to a 3, I guess, for our review tonight. But like, if you're a Catholic,
especially if you're a traditional Catholic, I think you'll find yourself right at home reading this.
Yeah, if you're a traditional Catholic, it's probably a 4. If you're anyone else, it's probably a 2. I think,
or a 3, or a 3, 2 or 3.
Depends. If you're not Catholic at all, probably a 2.
You're probably not going to read this if you're not.
If you're a normie
Catholic, unless your friend forces you to read it for a podcast.
Yeah, basically. If you're a normie Catholic, probably a 3. And if you're a traditional Catholic, then probably a 4 like you, Chris.
Yeah. Fair enough. So ours averages out the difference between my pseudo to full trad Catholic.
We have the full range here. We gave an accurate rating collectively to a regular normie Catholic reading it.
Anyway, on that note, I do think there are enough redeeming qualities to recommend this, especially at the prices listed at.
It's cheap.
At least read a synopsis of it before you decide. And then if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I am not offering any refunds if you don't like it, though. I am not at all sponsored. I have never even talked to the author. I like him, though.
I'm not going to say I hate the book. I won't say that. It's very prominently niche. That's all.
Okay. Kind of like, what was that other one we decided was very niche? Was that the Jonathan Kahn book?
Yes.
That was the other one that was niche. Was very niche.
Because he's also to a very specific audience
that already agrees with him.
Yeah, but not denominationally niche, I don't think.
No, he's more broadly. He's a little more broad than this is, just a little bit. But it's people that agree with him about his opinions.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where when you get one of these religious books, it's like, I don't know, it's either
there's very few people that can do what C.S. Lewis did, which bridge the gap between a lot of things.
Yeah, the odds are it's not going to be religion agnostically, I guess not niche to the religion itself, but it's, I think, a little bit more rare when it's so denominationally niche, unless it's like a theological book.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, we're gonna end. In nomine patri. No, I'm just kidding. This has been Printed and Pressed. Again, my name is Chris.
I'm Andrew, and we've taken up a lot of your time.
If you watched the whole thing, I appreciate it.
If you watched the whole thing, you might have been bored already. But hey, the next.
If you watch the whole thing, you're probably not bored. You're probably really into this. If you've
been waiting for us to like kill each other through the screens, maybe.
This went better than I expected, just to be fair. But
hey, that's because we're friends, Chris.
Anyways,
it's the only thing saving me from the future Inquisition.
The American Inquisition.
Yeah, but the next book we're reviewing is what, Chris?
Is it The Fellowship?
Yes.
Okay, it's The Fellowship of the Ring. Good old Catholic Tolkien. Anyways, fun little fact since we're talking about the Latin Mass and whatnot. When Vatican II happened, Tolkien actually refused to say any responses in English.
Yep, he only did it in Elvish.
He did all his responses in Latin, despite all of his priests telling him to stop.
It would have been funnier if he did it in Elvish.
It would have been funnier, but that man was a very.
There's a Catholic church out there that only speaks in Elvish.
I bet there's somebody working on a Bible translation in Elvish. Anyways,
that'd be hilarious, but yes.
Did you? Okay, so speaking of the other thing about the Hobbit, I think Tolkien would have approved of this. Somebody actually translated the Hobbit into Latin. Like the entire Hobbit into Latin. It's like called Il Hobbiton or something. Anyway, it's ridiculous. It's like $30 for the hardback, and that's the only version you can get. But it exists.
That's not bad. Price-wise, that's not that bad.
Can you imagine spending the amount of time it probably took to translate the Hobbit to Latin?
Not as much time as it probably takes for the average person to try to read it in Latin.
It's part of like a series of books to teach people Latin. They did that one, so it works.
Seen as somebody who translated it, probably already knew Latin.
Yeah, they did. They absolutely did. So
yeah.
Anyways, that's just some fun facts for you guys rolling into the fellowship. And I think we're going to let this one just simmer on the burner, let people watch it, see what they say. So
yeah,
as always, I'm Chris.
And I'm Andrew.
And what the heck podcast is this?
Printed and Pressed.
TheologicalAnswers.com. Anyways, we'll see you on the next one.
Bye, guys.